welcome to another episode of Dream Stories Podcast. We're glad to have you with us again this week. And we have Lisa back with us for another episode. Or I guess it's not back with us. It's just you were gone for an episode or two.
Yeah, I took a break.
So I'm glad you're back.
Thank you. I'm glad I'm back too.
So it's been a rough day.
It's been a day.
It has been a day.
It's been a day.
So we're gonna press through and record our episode.
Yes.
Anyway.
Okay. So, that sounds good to me.
So I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
And I love you. I just want everybody to know that.
I know you love me, and I love you too.
Okay. All right.
Listen, our episode had the stress we've had was not between you and I. So let's just say that.
I know,
you're
but
good. You're good.
I feel for you. So I just want you to know I love you.
Thank you.
Anyway.
I love you too.
Now everybody knows. Well, I hope they knew already.
I was going to say that, but I just thought I'm not going to go there. So we've been burning the candle at both ends, so we're both a little tired.
We're always doing that, though. It's crazy.
I think it's going to slow down at some point. I really do believe that.
I think that the end of time will slow it down at some point.
I mean, it's very possible. It could take that long, so we'll see.
All right, so it's crazy. So,
yeah.
All right. So this week, I have a friend from out of the United States, from another country, who had shared a dream with me and called and asked a question about that dream. And I initially asked him about being on the podcast, but the nature of the dream was one we thought, it might be better if we just talked about the dream instead of having them on the show to do the dream. And so that's the direction we're going to go. So
okay.
I
have no idea what the topic is.
You don't, because you weren't involved in the telephone conversation, and you haven't read ahead of time the dream. Yeah. And so I thought we're putting Lisa on the spot with it. And I thought we'd get your initial feel about the dream. And this is one of those times when we're going to talk about a dream that actually played out already, and they've already seen, kind of the end result of it. So we know what it was about. Right. And we know, how it played out and why they asked the question, which I thought was cool to talk about. Okay. But I thought before we got there, we'd walk through the dream anyway, first with some things. So I'm going to read the dream to you and go over it. So here we go. I'm curious.
Do I need to take notes? Is this a long dream? Is this a short dream?
It's not a real long dream. No, it's a pretty, it's a pretty short dream. So,
good.
Okay. So here we go. In the dream, a bear was sitting at my kitchen table. He then left the table and made a big mess at the entry of the house, scattering things around. He went out of the house while I got my gun. No words were spoken in the dream. Then I was on the shore of a lake with a couple of docks in the water in front of me. The bear, which was walking on two legs like a human, was not threatening me personally, but I had to get rid of it. I had a shotgun, and I tried twice to use it to kill the bear, but both times the gun malfunctioned, and I did not get a shot off. The bear then ran away in front of me, carrying a decent-sized fish in its mouth. It went on to one of the docks, jumped in the water, and swam away. And I have to be honest with you, when I first heard this dream, I'm thinking they were telling me a story, because they live in a place where it very well could have been a bear that got into their house. It would not
be an uncommon thing. I mean, I know who had the dream. You did tell me.
You do know who had the dream.
You did tell me who had the dream. So I know the family, and I know I'm just familiar with who they are and what they're like.
So they could have run into a real bear. They're kind of an
adventurous family.
Yeah.
This is the family. I love them. They fed us moose lips. Wasn't it moose lips one time?
It may have been moose lips. It was moose something.
I think so.
Yeah. So.
It was pretty interesting. So so them coming in contact in a dream with a bear. They didn't feed us
moose lips, but a friend of theirs fed us moose lips.
Well, I think they provided the moose lips for us to eat.
Well, that's beside the point.
I'm just saying. I remember the family, and I loved them. They were precious, and I just I was just thinking about how it doesn't surprise me that those elements were in the dream.
It's true. I mean,
it's just appropriate. So I thought that was pretty cool.
So let me just get your feel. If you were hearing that dream on the street, whatever, just out and about somewhere, What would be your initial take on it? I know what its interpretation is, and so I really am putting you on the spot.
You are putting me on the spot, so you know what I'm going to do?
What?
I'm going to repeat the dream back. I'm going to use your technique. I'm going to repeat the dream back to you.
Time. Yeah, there you go.
So I don't know who had the dream, if it was the wife or the husband.
It was the husband.
Okay. I had a feeling it was the husband based on the dream, but you...
Well, that's what I understand.
I thought you said it was the wife earlier, so I wasn't sure. Okay. So he had the dream, and the dream was he was sitting at a table, and a bear... Was he sitting at the table with the bear?
The bear was sitting at the kitchen table.
Okay, and the bear got up, made a mess as he was leaving, kind of just... And he went to get his gun.
Yep.
And then the scene changes, and they're at a lake, and there are two piers, and he, the bear does something I can't remember. But
there's no words spoken. I think that's important.
Right.
And the bear was walking on its hind legs
like a human.
Yep.
Well, but I think polar bears and grizzly bears all bears can stand up erect like that and walk around, but it is unusual unless they're looking for something.
Yep. But
anyway, and then the bear goes out onto one of the piers, gets a fish.
Yeah, he gets a decent sized fish, but now he tried to shoot it twice before that.
But his gun wouldn't work. I thought that was
right.
coming next. That's what I was going to say next.
Then the bear went and got a fish and ran off.
Okay. He tried
a
to
decent sized fish. It ran off.
Yeah. Okay. And
they
called you. They felt like they knew what it meant. They called you and they asked you a question.
They asked me a question about it, which I think we want to talk about.
Right. But I don't get to that question.
No, I'm sorry. I just wanted to stump you with the dream first. So.
Well, anytime I see a bear, I would want to know what their feelings were. Were they? To me, that's always important.
Yeah.
Were you afraid? Obviously, if you went to get a gun.
I don't know that I would say afraid, but needed to get rid of the bear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, a bear, I think of bearing one another's burdens, and I can't help it. And that's probably not even right. But, I mean, my first thought was bear. Actually, my first thought was Goldilocks and the Three Bears. I was thinking, that was the first thought because they sat down at a table and then they made a mess in the house. So that was my first thought went to that. I thought, where's this going to go? But not just the bear. I think of the bears being part of the focus. I think of him trying to get rid of it. Is one of the, I would say, I call the nugget. So I'd say the bears are the nugget. Him trying to get rid of it is a nugget, and then him going away. The piers also made me think, because when I think of piers, I wouldn't just look at it as the pier. I would think of it as my peers, those around me.
Yeah.
You know, so I always look for metaphor and play on words.
Well, I think you hit a really good point because he emphasized the bear walking on 2 feet like a human, and then you're seeing this as a peer or someone, a person they might be related to. So I think that's a good analogy that you're picking up on.
Yes, but if you're asking me to give an interpretation, are you asking me?
I'm just asking you generally for your thoughts on it. You don't have to give a specific interpretation.
You interpret dreams every day. Why don't you tell me? I mean, I kind of want to take a shot, but I don't think it'd be. I mean, I just feel
go
like
for
I'm
it. It'll be
fun.
It'll be fun to see how it works because we know how it played out. So that's one of the reasons I don't want to say what I think it means. I think I could have interpreted it in a way that would have fit precisely to how it played out, but I already know how it played out, and that's a real issue when you're interpreting dreams. If you already know something about it,
that puts a lot of pressure on me. It does, because I'm like, okay, if it's already happened,
it's true, but it's a good illustration of how I think it makes a good illustration of how the interpretation doesn't have to be specific to still have application. That's why I want it, because if you interpret like I think you will, I think you'll be right on track with it. So
just that maybe you're in a season. Of course, we know it's already happened, but I would say this to someone. If I just met someone on the street, I would just say, there's some things that you've had to endure, that you've had to put up with, that have been messy, and you've had to bear with someone over some things, or could have been a couple of individuals, but it seems like it was one individual. But and even though you've tried to rid yourself of the problem on your own, using your own power your own force just by mere time. It takes care of itself. You don't have to do anything.
I think, believe it or not, you interpreted the dream exactly like the people interpreted it. And that's the reason they called. Now, what you don't have is who the person is, and they actually were able to discern who it was because they were watching the situation unfold. They were having to bear with someone in a situation, and they felt like the dream was saying that over time, they would not have to deal with the situation directly. It would take care of itself. And so let me just tell you what happened and what was going on.
Okay.
And you'll see how while your interpretation isn't direct, it would have given insight into the situation, but it would have still left the same question they had. So the family identifies that this particular bear walking up like a person, the two peers, it's a peer situation or a workplace situation. The dream starts in the house. And we know most of the time a house relates to life, ministry, workplace, etc. And in this case, they felt like it related to a ministry or their workplace. And a person there who doesn't talk a lot. No words were spoken in the dream. So those were clues for them that this bear represented a particular person who they had never had any trouble with at work. But suddenly, after the dream, there were some things that started going wrong. And there were two occasions that came up where the individual who had the dream thought they might have to fire the person. And circumstances changed. It looked like things had gotten better, and they did not. Now, as they saw the dream, they felt like what it meant was the individual would end up leaving on their own, and everything would be okay. The problem was that's not how it played out. The individual didn't leave on their own. They violated some protocols and had to be fired. So it becomes very interesting. And the call I got was, how does this work? Because everything in the dream was exactly the way we thought it was. The metaphors played out exactly until the very last scene, because the bear did not take a big fish in its mouth and go away. It had to take what turns out to be, I'll explain it in a minute, a little bitty fish and be shot, basically, be shooed away.
Okay, but he tried to shoot it. Did he actually have the gun and the gun
Actually
didn't
had
fire?
the gun and the gun didn't fire. Things didn't work out, and the bear was saved a couple of times.
Saved.
Yeah, the gun didn't shoot.
Fire. Okay, because I was thinking to myself that...
I was thinking about the bear that prays before it eats its
yeah,
person. It says, I'm a Christian
you can
bear.
tell that. Yeah, yeah.
So,
okay.
yes, okay, go ahead.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
The
bear was saved?
Yeah. I was just thinking how, even though it may not have played out the way they think it did, I don't necessarily think it didn't, because when he went to fire them in his own power, it didn't work. But when they broke protocol, the firing was kind of taken out of his hands.
Yeah, it was.
In a way,
it was. And he didn't have...
I don't know the detail.
Yeah, well...
But also I'm thinking give him a fish, which means allow him to have a fish. Allow him to have a severance pay and leave.
Well, that's exactly... you hit exactly on what the metaphor is.
I was actually going to say that in the interpretation earlier. I was going to say, they're going to get something out of it that would make them be satisfied with leaving. And
what happens is they were hoping he would resign on his own, which would have been like the dream. The bear gets a big fish in his mouth, runs away. If he had resigned, there was going to be a 3 months severance pay. That was the policy of the organization. But instead, because they had to fire the individual, and this is why we're not giving details and didn't have the person on, because this wouldn't be right for us to identify to a point that people could figure out who this dream was about. Because the individual had to be fired, they only got 3 weeks worth of pay.
So it was smaller than the big fish. So
instead of the big fish in their mouth, they only went away, as my friends put it, they went away with a minnow instead of a big fish.
Yeah. You know what's interesting is how metaphors really play out in the dream. Because had you had anything else represent the bear, I mean, just reinsert any other thing in there, and it might not would work the same way.
Yeah.
You know and I just think it's so interesting how God puts a language in our life, dream language in our life, that allows us to see that there's a bear, there's a table, there's I think about, there's a scripture that says he prepares a table before us in the presence of our enemies. Yeah. So sometimes even we have to sit down with things we don't like, but
let's be clear, this person wasn't an enemy, but the concept you're talking about,
no,
the
just circumstances
created
just a struggle,
adversity,
yeah, right. And how he used language as metaphors that this person's familiar with, and maybe even values, or you know what I'm saying? And I just think it's really cool.
Well, and what's interesting, and I wanted you to do that interpretation because I wanted people to get a chance to see, we know how this played out. Mm-hmm. And so if I were interpreting that dream, because I know how it played out, my fear would be I would take some of the information I already know and work it into the interpretation, right, to make the interpretation sound better. And that's not where our heart is. That's part of what we teach on, and what we try and get you guys who are listening to understand is that we want you to hear the Spirit of God, not look good. Yeah, doing an interpretation.
Well, honestly, I didn't feel good interpreting it. Not because there's anything wrong with the dream. I just felt, well, like you said, there was more pressure, because then there's this pressure of, oh, do you know how to interpret dreams? You've only done it for, 20 years, and here you are, now you feel pressure. And that's why I said, maybe you should do it. You do it. And then I realized, wait a minute, you already know it. You couldn't do it.
But it did but that's another good illustration. It put pressure on you, which makes it harder to hear. Mm-hmm. Stress, we always talk about it. Mm-hmm. Peace is the potting soil of revelation. That's what our mentor used to say. Mm-hmm. So peace makes it easier to interpret. Yeah. And so you had a level of stress, both from our day and from the circumstances of the dream, not just having to do it, but knowing the family's probably going to watch this and listen to this. Yeah. And other people are watching and listening, and I already know the application. If you get it wrong, what do? Just cut off the recording and not play it or something?
Well, I almost said I can't do it. I just can't, And I did feel so like, oh my goodness, this just seems so simple. How could it be so simple? And
but we overthink. We overthink too many times.
We do.
And instead of trusting what we hear, we overthink, well, it couldn't be that easy, or it couldn't be that simple.
Right.
And so now we try and make it more complicated or complex. And honestly, your interpretation was right on track. It just wasn't as specific as the couple who had the dream, because let's face it, they probably saw the dream. I don't know this for sure, but probably saw the dream, had a rough interpretation, then began to see it play out, and were able to see the very specific pieces of it. Oh, it's this person. Oh, it's this situation. Oh, it's this, they need to, they can leave on their own and they'll have provision. So sometimes a more general interpretation gets more and more specific when it's your own dream as you begin to see it playing out.
I mean, to be honest, and this is true, that most of the time when we're interpreting dreams, it's rare that we would say, oh, this applies to exactly this. I mean, we would not normally say that. We leave that up to the dreamer to say, has this happened? Has this not yet happened? Or are you in the midst of it? Past, present, or future? Which one is it? And most of the time, people don't know until they sit and think. Now, sometimes we'll see people go, oh, I know exactly what that is, or that doesn't seem familiar to me. But then you give them a year or 2 or 5, and then all of a sudden they go,
it makes a lot
that's
more sense.
What that dream means. So it's rare that we would say, this applies to this. I would never have taken what you had given me and said, this applies to a workplace.
Well, and that's the
I did
correct
hear
way
peers.
to interpret it. Right.
I thought peers are important. I just, but again, I was not confident at all, and I used your technique of let me repeat your dream back to you, hoping something more would come. I didn't get any more revelation, but I just started
you really
walking
had
through the
something to walk
steps.
through.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, so
And I think the thing that's cool here is we do tell people, when you're interpreting a dream for someone else, it's not your job to apply it.
Right.
It's your job to give enough of an interpretation that then helps the dreamer understand how to apply it. And in this case, they were both interpreting and applying because it was their dream, the family's dream, the individual's dream. And so it once you get past the interpretation process and you begin to see pieces of it, it becomes easier to apply. Now, the cool thing here is the question I got, which is, why did this dream play out exactly like the metaphors? Mm-hmm. The person who worked with them, home often represents workplace, at the table with them, their provision comes from the same place, employee. Mm-hmm. They begin to make a mess. Situation arises that isn't good. Mm-hmm. They get start out of the house as they go to get the gun, thinking this person needs to be fired, but things twice resolve themselves so the firing doesn't have to occur. Gun misfires. The bear's saved, but then things diverged because the metaphors of the dream said this person will leave on their own and they'll take provision with them. They'll get their 3-month severance pay. Mm-hmm. It didn't happen that way. Mm-hmm. It happened with they get fired. Mm-hmm. They only get 3 weeks of pay. The question was, why the difference? Why at the end does it diverge? And I think something that's interesting here is that we talk about dreams being intrinsic and extrinsic, and this dream is one of those that you usually pick. It's either intrinsic or it's extrinsic. And this dream is both. It's both. It's both intrinsic and extrinsic. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is it's about the person. And when we talk about an extrinsic dream, we talk about prayer or, what can you do to aid that person? Usually it's prayer. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at this person's situation and saying, okay, it's a call to pray that they would make wise choices and leave with provision. The intrinsic side is this dream is about something I have to deal with as a dreamer because this was the employer, the person who had responsibility. So in that case, it's how do I respond? What do I do? Do I fire them? Do I wait for them to leave, etc.? And so now we're dealing with both an intrinsic and an extrinsic dream. From the intrinsic side, they followed this dream exactly. They waited and gave this person a chance to walk away. So there's a perfect response there.
Right.
Why does it not play out the way the dream indicates? Because it's also an extrinsic dream.
Right.
Pray they'll make the right decision, but they have to make that decision for themselves. We can't make someone make the right choice. Right. And clearly, in this case, the person didn't choose wisely, and they end up without the provision they could have had. And so that's why it didn't play out. It's not because the dream failed. It's because the individual was not able to walk it out in the way that would have been best for them. And that's not the responsibility of the dreamer. Yeah,
we don't get to force things to happen. We don't get to, make it turn out the way we want to, even though we may have the dream and think, oh, it's cluing me into something, what's got to happen, And sometimes we may not understand the full scope of it or have the full understanding, and that's why they reached out and called you, to say, hey, we thought we had the full interpretation. Did we miss something along the road? And what'd you tell them?
Well, I said, I don't think you missed something. I think this is a dream that is a dream for learning. So you recognize now that the extrinsic dream is a call to prayer, call to intercede in that setting. And even really, if you didn't pray as much as you should, sort of thing, you can't say you failed. because part of the purpose of this kind of a dream is also for training, to teach us how to approach these kind of things. And I thought it was interesting because the individual said to me, they said, hey, I've had 2 dreams I've had to call you about in the last couple of years, and both times the dreams related to I needed to be praying, and I probably had not understood that aspect of the dream as well as I should.
I mean,
and
most
so
of
it
the time
really
that's
is a good
true.
reminder.
I mean, it's always good to think about, why are you having this dream?
Yeah.
I mean, I would say most of the time, even if it's something that has already happened, it's for a current learning process. So even if you have a dream about something that has happened, let's just say you have a dream about something that's already happened, and it's like, okay, that's in the past. Well, there's a reason why you're dreaming about it. If it's something for future, there's a reason why you're dreaming about it. It's for some type of purpose of teaching or a topic of prayer, or you've missed something.
Yeah.
I would say.
Well, and the interesting thing to me too here is this is a learning curve for the dreamer, not for the individual who the dream is about.
Exactly.
Because that's their own journey. So you can't say that the individual the dream was about did something wrong. You can't say that the dreamer did something wrong. You can say, however, that the dreamer gets to learn something out of the process that helps them approach future dreams in a better way.
I was actually just about to say the same exact thing. I think so many times we get in our heads that if our dream comes to pass, or if we watch something play out that we feel like we had some type of knowledge from our Creator God, that somehow that puts us in a position of being right and the other person is being wrong. And that's not necessarily true. Now, I'm not saying there wasn't something that happened that, protocol or whatever, but it is everyone's individual journey with their Creator. I mean, you're not going to necessarily get along with everyone who work with, or whatever. But our prayer should be that everyone is successful. Everyone does better in life or makes the world a better place, So I agree. I don't think you can say this. Everybody has their own journey.
Well, and we have to remember, too, that sometimes people learn through the trial, through the difficult things, more than we learn through the easy, everything just worked out perfect things. So you could almost say, well, if this situation had played out exactly the way the dream played out, you might have missed some lessons in it. And that's why it's very difficult. You can't be critical of the circumstances. You can't be critical of the dream. You can only say this was a learning experience. It teaches us something about understanding a dream and how we respond when a dream's application doesn't turn out exactly the way we thought it should. Does that mean we give up and we quit? That God missed it? Does that mean somehow we blew it? Or is it just a part of the learning process?
Right.
And I think that's important for us to remember. We may not see in full.
Yeah.
We may only see in part. Or a dream may give us an outcome, but not the outcome. Or one possibility, but not the only possibility. And so it really does become important to be careful in that arena.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad I didn't fall on my face in front of God and countries.
No, you did really good.
It would have been
with
okay
it, so.
even if I had gotten it
Well,
wrong.
we would have had a good lesson out of that side of it too. So.
If I had missed it, or I don't even like to say missed it, if I didn't quite, nail the interpretation or whatever, you're not going to get every single one exactly right. I mean, there is a process of learning and trial and error, but it's important to keep trying. I didn't want to, but I was like, okay, I got to, because this is what we tell everybody else to do. So, yeah.
Well, see,
good.
now you get to put me on the spot in the future,
Okay.
and so that's only fair, right?
I definitely will be.
You won't forget that. I'm quite
enjoy
certain.
doing that.
Yeah.
But I have never seen you flounder. So
Well, it can happen. It does happen. I'm not perfect either. So that's really. I mean, it really is. That's the thing. I think that's another great lesson. We don't want people to look at it as trying to be perfect. We want people to look at it from the perspective of just trying.
Well, it's probably good that they see two sides of it. I mean, I am a heavy dreamer. You're not a heavy dreamer. I mean, like, I'm not saying you don't dream. You don't remember yours as well. And when you do, you remember it well when you have them.
Yeah.
or that's not right.
I remember
You
them well
have
when
them.
they're significant.
Exactly. So it's good to know that, there's different types of people, and some interpret way quicker, way better. They get a little bit quicker than others, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
We all.
And shout out to our friends. They did a great job with the interpretation of the dream.
That's exactly
so,
right.
And that's another thing. Just because you didn't see the fullness of it, you got enough of it to be aware of what was going on.
The great thing is God is not surprised by those things.
That's right. It's true. It's good. Well, we're out of time. We're over time a little bit.
Okay, I'll be quiet.
No, it's okay. I guess we close out with saying, good to have you again this week. Like, share, comment, subscribe, all those kind of good things we love for you to do. Until next time, keep dreaming.